Welcome back to another episode of Apartment Miscellaneous Talks, and today we have a doozy for you. We have the world-renowned, best-selling author, TEDx speaker with us here today, Mr. Matthew Dix. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Mr. Matthew Dix. It's nice to meet you. I am I'm a parent and a husband. I'm an elementary school teacher when I'm not doing all my other things. So, I'm a full-time teacher for the last 24 years in public schools. So, I always think that's my first job because that's the one I have to actually be at a place at a time doing something with kids. But I am also a writer and a speaker and a consultant and a storyteller and all of those other things too.
You seem very multifaceted.
Well, I like to tell people I'm sort of involved in sentences. Like whatever I'm doing, I'm kind of putting sentences together, whether I'm talking to kids or putting it on a page or standing on a stage or even helping like a client with a marketing plan. It's all about really words. I can't like fix a sink. There's a hinge on a cabinet in my kitchen that I can't actually repair in any way whatsoever. Like I'm not multifaceted in any way. Like when something breaks in the house, I got to call somebody to fix it for me and I feel stupid. The sink wasn't working yesterday and my wife fixed it because I couldn't fix it. So only multifaceted in a very small area of my life. In other areas, I'm a complete idiot.
Wow. Wow. Talk about your upbringing and your love for writing.
Sure. Well, I was brought up in a broken home, like really kind of a mess. I got kicked out of my house when I was 18. So it wasn't sort of an easy go for a long time. I ended up in a lot of trouble, but I sort of fell in love with writing sort of in high school. I didn't have a future ahead of me. I wasn't going to college. No one had ever actually said the word college to me, and I knew I had to find a place to live after I graduated high school. But I got lucky. I ran into a teacher my senior year who gave me a chance to do some writing, stand in front of a class. I made girls laugh. You know, I started a business in high school writing papers for other kids, letting them cheat by having me do their work for them. And with that money that I earned selling term papers to them, I bought my first car, which was really helpful when I got kicked out of my house. So, I fell in love with writing because it offered me a little bit of hope that like maybe there is a future for me because I didn't really see much after high school for a long time. So I started writing my senior year of high school, and I have written every single day of my life since that day without ever missing a day, so it's been a lot of hard work, but writing really became the thing that sort of pulled me out of a lot of trouble.
At, at your the high school that you teach, do you teach English?
No, I teach fifth grade. I teach 10-year-olds, little kids. I teach at
Ah,
elementary school. They're with me all day long. So I mean, I guess I teach English because part of the day is writing and part of the day is reading, but I got to teach math and science and social studies and puberty and all those other things too. So
does working with children, because children are oftentimes imaginative, does that help with your writing process? Hearing some of their wild ideas?
I think spending time with other human beings in the way I do every day, 20 people in the room with me, I think that's what helps me more than anything. I get a multitude of experiences. I work in a Title I school, so there's a lot of there's a lot of struggle. There's poverty in our school. I think we have 18 different languages spoken in our school. So I've got a multicultural classroom filled with kids from all over the world, or their parents at least, who are all over the world. So I think that helps me a lot in terms of not getting locked into one thing and keeping perspective and engaging in conversation every day with people. So I think that helps. I'm not sure if like their imaginations really inspire me as much as their stories and their words. I just had a kid on Thursday of this week. We were talking about sort of what do you want to be when you grow up, and the kid said to me something to the effect of, "I used to want to be a soldier, but then the pandemic happened, and I realized that I loved my life, so now I don't want to get shot in a ditch anymore." And like just hearing a kid say that, like that's gonna fill me better than anything else. So I hear the things like that all the time, and that really helps a lot.
Smart kid.
Yeah, yeah, smart kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you decide to become an author and why?
Well, I guess I sort of dreamed of becoming an author in high school, but I didn't actually think it would ever happen. When I was in high school, there was no internet. So like it just seemed absolutely impossible to become an author because it felt like you had to know somebody, and I didn't know anybody. So, I sort of had the dream, but I just thought it was a dream that could never happen. Sort of like, you want to be a basketball player, but you're 5'3". You know what I mean? You can have the dream, but you know, if you don't have if you don't have that way to sort of reach out and make it happen, it doesn't feel like a possibility. But I eventually made it to college, when I was 24. I think I was 24 years old when I made it to college finally. I started a community college and I started writing there pretty seriously. And, I started to think maybe I could publish a book someday. Like maybe that's a possibility. So it was always like a dream, but it always felt really far on the horizon. But I'm a big fan of the belief that sort of everything worth doing takes 1,000 tiny steps. And I just kept telling myself, I'm going to keep taking tiny steps and maybe someday I'll get there. So it's been a dream for a very, very long time. It didn't feel very realistic or possible, until, you know, maybe like 2003 or 4 when I was really actually writing things that I thought were good finally.
So, what was your major in college?
I sort of was a double major. I majored in English with a specialty in creative writing, but I knew I wasn't going to make a living writing immediately, and I kind of wanted a girlfriend, so I didn't want to be poor and be living in my car. And I had been homeless for a period in my life, so I understood like you need money because I did not want to end up on the streets again. So while I was getting my English degree, I went to an all women's college through this loophole in these colleges came together in a consortium, and you could sort of go to local colleges to take an extra class if you needed one. And the women's college down the road from my school, Trinity, they had a full education program. And so I just sort of like went through that little loophole and said, I'm going to take a full degree program at this all women's college. And at first they were like, I don't think you can do that. And then they looked at the rules and they went, I guess you can do that. So I got an elementary teaching degree and an English degree sort of at the same time. So it was a busy
Wow.
4 years. I was managing a McDonald's restaurant full time while I was doing it. But, there was a time when I was homeless and I was in jail and I was on trial for a crime I didn't commit. And so once I got past that, everything else seemed easy. I know I have to do like 2 full-time degree programs and work full-time and also work part-time. And I was launching a business, all of that. I don't know how I did it today. Looking back, it seems impossible. But I know that once you come out of struggle, everything gets a lot easier. So I was really coming out of a lot of struggle. So I just made it happen.
You lived a very interesting life. That's
Yeah.
crazy. You going through those things, homelessness, fighting, charges or jail or like all these things, was writing an outlet for you? Because we all have outlets. Some could be alcohol, some can be playing basketball, some can be poetry, whatever it may be. Was writing ever that outlet for you to express yourself?
It really wasn't at that time when I was going through that stuff. I have journals from that time and you could see I was writing about it, but I sort of wasn't pouring my soul onto the page at that time. I was really just trying to fight, through it as best as I could. I got really lucky. I mean, you know, it's a miracle that I didn't end up sort of in a worse spot than I did. When I got kicked out at 18, I told myself, I'm never going to use an illegal drug because I know I have no safety net. There's no one to take care of me for the rest of my life. So if I end up in any trouble at all, I'm doomed. So I said to myself, never going to use a drug. And so my buddies, around me, they were experimenting with things and I just chose not to. And thank God, because if I had gotten arrested and I was, holding something at the time or I got addicted to something, the trouble would have been exponentially worse. But I got lucky and I made some good decisions and I had some good friends who supported me when I got in trouble. My friends really became my family to a great degree. So the writing didn't really, it didn't serve that purpose back then. It serves much more that purpose today. Now I stand on stages all the time telling stories and doing stand up and I do a lot of writing, and all of those things now are outlets for a lot of the feelings I have, and when I'm angry or upset, it serves it much more now, but back then it wasn't so much.
So it's safe to say back then that you didn't really have much of a support system.
Yeah, no, I had some poor friends who were as poor as me, But when I was in trouble, sometimes just knowing that there are people who are sort of paying attention to your life, and concerned with your life, that's enough. So, for me, that meant a lot. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of support back then.
What would you say is the overall goal of your content?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess it's twofold. When I'm telling stories, writing memoir, and doing stand up, I think what I'm trying to do is to be known. I was in Brazil a few years ago, speaking about 1,000 kids in an auditorium, and I took questions, and the first question I got was from this teenage girl. She said, you write books, you're on the internet, you write a blog, you're recording things, you're telling stories. She goes, why are you putting all that stuff out there? Like, why? It just seems like you're crazy wanting to get stuff out there. And I said, no one's ever asked that question before. And the answer that came right to my mind was, I'm trying to get the attention of a mother who never really paid attention to me and passed away, and a father who abandoned my family at 8 and sort of never came home. I said, so I think part of it is I'm trying to get the attention of parents who never gave me attention, and one of them is now gone, and yet I'm still trying to be heard by them and maybe by the greater world. So that stuff I think is probably true when it comes to me talking about myself and writing about myself. With my fiction, the thing I'm so interested in is, if you read my books, a lot of my characters, they tend to be people who are unlike anybody else. When you're a kid, everyone tells you to find your own path, blaze your own trail, don't give in to peer pressure. But when you become an adult, if you really do that, if you sort of blaze your own trail, if you're, unlike anybody else, a lot of times you get punished for it. A lot of times it's hard to go into a business and say, hey, I want a job, and not sort of conform to what everybody else looks like, sounds like, acts
Mm.
like, right? And so it's hard to be yourself, I think, as an adult, because I just think it's not appreciated very often. And so the characters in my books tend to be people who are brave enough to be themselves, even when everyone around them doesn't want them to be themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm interested in those people. I think there's enormous courage in a person's decision to do the thing that they think is right, even when everyone else thinks it's wrong. So that's sort of the thing I write about the most in terms of my fiction.
You being a writer, but also a storyteller, and as we know with storytellers, um, I also think that's a special gift and a special talent to tell a story and break it down in front of multitudes of people. And my question for storytellers is, when it's your time or when you're long gone or not here, do you want someone to tell your story?
Yeah, I
Or do
do.
you want your story to one day transcend even when you're not here?
I guess, yes. The thing I fear most in life is death. I think about it more often than you would ever imagine. I think about it obsessively, and I'm terrified of it. I tell people I plan on living forever or die trying. So, if I acknowledge the fact that I'm going to die someday, I sort of fall apart. So, I think part of the reason I tell stories about myself and write them and produce books is sort of the belief that, if I die someday, I will not be forgotten, because I think most people are forgotten. If we think about sort of every human being who was alive, let's say in 1800, almost all of them have been forgotten. Like, even in your family, like your great grandparents, you probably know nothing about them. You might know their names, and maybe you know what your great grandfather did for a living, and that's probably all you know, if you even know that. So it only takes 2 generations to be forgotten, you
Yeah.
know. So I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want that to happen to anyone, frankly. I think we all deserve to be remembered. But unless you cure a disease or win a battle or assassinate someone or go to the moon, if unless you do one of these extraordinary things, you get forgotten. And so I'm trying not to be forgotten.
I think that's very commendable, and I talk about it with him a lot. I care about how I'm going to be remembered when I'm not here. One person that he's our favorite player, Kobe Bryant. He's going to be remembered for an eternity. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to do something that is impactful and influential. So
Yeah, he, I remember, it's one of those moments where you remember, or at least I do. I remember exactly where I was when I found out that he died,
Same.
and if you're that kind of a person, like if you're a person who people remember where you were when he died, you're going to be a person that's going to be remembered for a very, very long time as a result.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Explain your book, Someday is Today, and why do you think the creative process is so important?
Well, Someday is Today is a book that basically argues that, when we want to become the makers of things, whether it's writing a book or doing art or playing a sport or even like making a garden in your backyard, whatever your dream is, whatever you want to like sort of do with your life, most people think that there's going to be a tomorrow. And oftentimes they say, well, someday I'm going to do this thing. And almost all the time, they never get to it. Instead, they spend their lives waiting for the right moment or waiting for the right time or waiting for the opportunity to present itself. And instead, they just die. They run out of some days and then they're gone.
Mm,
So Someday is Today is a book that gives you strategies that make sure that every day counts, that you're not wasting your time. Because I just watch everyone waste their time all the time doing things that are ultimately going to be meaningless. I'm sort of very interested in how I'm going to feel at the end of my life. And so when it comes time for me to make a decision, like actually today, right, there was about a 2 hour block. I took my daughter out to lunch. We went to the bookstore. We bought a couple books. I came home. My first thought was, I'm in the middle of a movie that I've been watching while I'm on the bike upstairs, when I'm exercising. Kind of want to watch the end of that movie. I'm kind of into it. But then I thought to myself, will I really even remember that movie when I'm dead? Or, when I'm 100 and I'm lying in my deathbed and I'm looking back on how I spend the next 2 hours of today, would I rather spend it like working on a book, which is what I ultimately did, and then produce that book and have that book remembered forever? Or do I want to go sit on a couch and watch the end of a movie that I'm going to forget about in 5 years? So Someday is Today is tries to get people to make those better decisions. Because I think what happens is if you asked me right now what I want to do, it's always play golf, eat pizza, go out for ice cream. Those are the choices I would always make if I wanted to feel good right now. But what I'm trying to do is play the long game and say to myself, where do I want to be in 5, 10, 15 years? How do I want to feel about my life when I'm 100? And the 100-year-old version of me never says, binge watch a TV show, right? Never going to be happy about me binge watching a TV show. It's just not going to be the thing, or just relaxing even is not going to be something that the 100-year-old version of myself is going to want me to do. Because when I'm 80, there's going to be plenty of time to relax. And when I'm 80, I'm going to have plenty of time to watch all those TV shows. So right now, when I can do other things and I can be productive and I can make stuff that I'm proud of that will last, that's what I'm trying to do. And that my book helps people make those better decisions.
Are there writers that inspire you?
Yeah, Stephen King inspires the hell out of me. If you ever want to read a book about writing, his book on writing is fantastic. I love that book because he writes about how when he was getting started and no one wanted to publish anything that he was writing, he was writing on a little table next to the washing machine. His kids were sick and he couldn't afford the medicine to make them feel better. And he's trying to write books and he's making no money at a bad teaching job actually in Maine. And he's ready to give up hope in that book. He's ready to quit writing and just like find a way to take care of his kids. And he ends up throwing away the beginning draft of Carrie, his first book, his first big hit, the one that launches his career and gets him $500,000. He takes that first draft and he throws it in the trash thinking it's terrible, and his wife pulls it out of the trash and reads it and says, this is good, I can help you with this. Like, you're not getting the girl stuff right, the high school girl stuff is all wrong, but I can help you with that. But the story's good. And so, he's a real guy. He's a real guy who couldn't buy what he calls the pink stuff, which is the medicine that like my daughter was taking 2 weeks ago when she had a cold. He didn't even have the money to buy his kids medicine. He's writing on a little table next to a washing machine and a dryer. And he ends up writing, a best-selling novel. And I just think that's a message people have to hear, because a lot of times when I meet with people who want to be writers, they tell me nonsense like, oh, well, I can only write between 10 and 2 and I got to write in a Starbucks and I need to have a latte and I like, restored wood, and I need to have my all this nonsense, you know, and I always
Yeah.
remind them there were guys in ditches and trenches in World War One in Europe, you know, with gas masks on and bombs exploding over their head. And they literally had pencils and notebooks and they were writing stories, hoping that if I survive this battle and all the others that are to come, maybe someday someone will read something I wrote. So those guys didn't need Starbucks and lattes and, you know, 10 a.m. reading time. They didn't need any of that nonsense. And Stephen King was the same way. So he's pretty inspiring to me. And he's had some trouble. You know, he had some serious addiction issues for a period of time in his life that he managed to overcome. He did not have an easy road. And I always admire people who have a lot of bumps in their road and come out okay on the other end.
Why is uh why is being creative important? And what are some of the benefits of being creative?
Sure. Well, first I'll say that when I say being creative, that's almost anything. So being creative means right now I'm recording videos for a project I'm working on. I teach people how to tell stories and you can sort of download my videos. And there's a woman who works with me, my production manager, Kaya. She doesn't actually make any of the videos. She doesn't sit in front of the camera. It's none of her ideas. But what she does is she shoots the film, she goes home, and she makes me look great. She understands how to use all that software to cut 3 cameras into one shot and make it look great. That's creative. Even though she's not sort of spouting out new ideas, she's making something beautiful. I have a client who wants to grow a garden in her backyard. She's an older lady. She's dreamed of having a garden all her life. And now she's realized this is crazy. It's not that hard to make a garden. Why have I been dreaming about it? Why don't I go do it? I think if you put a vegetable garden in your backyard, that's creative. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. My son was playing basketball the other day with an umbrella because it was raining and he loves basketball. So he was holding an umbrella in one hand, shooting hoops with the other. That's creative. So I think it's important to be creative because if you're not, what ultimately happens to you is you become a content consumer, which means you sit on your ass and you watch other people's stuff for the rest of your life. And I don't think at the end of your life, you're going to be feeling really good about that. So you're either making stuff or you're taking someone else's stuff and you're watching that instead. I don't think there's anything wrong with watching it. I mean, I'm reading books right now. I'm watching television shows. When I'm on my bike, I'm watching a movie. I am consuming content. But when I have the chance to make something, whether that thing's a shot in the hoop in the driveway or a vegetable garden or a book, I think that's the important stuff that we have to do. We are either making something or we're eating someone else's thing. And most people spend most of their life consuming other people's content and making nothing themselves. And that's the tragedy, I think. Everyone's got something that they can make. And I want people to find the thing that they care about and start making that thing.
If um seeing how far you made it, especially through adversity, if your parents were to see you now, what do you think they would say?
Yeah, it's sad for me because my mom passed away before I published a book, before I
Mm,
stood on a stage and performed, and before any of my kids were born.
wow.
So I'm sad for her. I'm really sad for her, and I was kicked out when I was 18, but it had a lot to do with my stepfather. Years after my mother passed away, I was talking about her one day to some friends and sort of telling about a bad decision she made, a bunch of bad decisions about parenting. And my wife, Alicia, she turned to me and she said, your mother was depressed all her life, right? Like untreated and depressed. And it had never occurred to me. But as soon as she said that, I thought, oh my God, she's right. My mom was depressed her whole life and she never got medicated or any help for it. And suddenly I was a lot less angry about my mother's behavior because I suddenly understood her in a real way. So I like to think if she had ever had a chance to see that her son had written books or stood on stages and performed in front of thousands of people even became like an award-winning teacher or had kids, I think it would have made her really happy. I think it would have brought some joy to her life that I think she was missing. So it breaks my heart that she passed so early. My father, he doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand him at all. We write to each other occasionally. Really, what it is I write him letters and I wait a really, really long time. And eventually he writes back to me. But that's the extent of our communication. He's really been out of my life since I was a little kid. And I
Mm,
don't understand why. I just keep inviting him in and he doesn't come through the door. So,
mm.
I've sent him my books. I've told him what I'm doing. I don't know. It's hard. I think maybe when you walk away from a family when they're young, there's a lot of shame involved. And to sort of turn around and come back in, I think is a hard thing to do. But the hard thing and the right thing are almost the same thing, are almost always the same thing. So
Mm,
I wish he would do that. So I'd like to think he's proud, but he has never said it to me.
got you. That's an interesting. Do you ever plan on writing a book about your life?
Yeah, I have a couple in the works, we memoirs, so little sections of my life rather than my whole life. I'm working on a I'm working on a musical actually. I've written some musicals with people, and I'm working on a musical with someone where I'll actually perform the musical, and I can't sing, so that's gonna be crazy.
Mhm.
But working on musicals and shows for the stage about my life, and we're doing some writing, or I'm doing some writing about my life too. So eventually something will be done. It depends on timing and things like that.
If your musical's ever at Broadway, please let me know.
Please
Yeah. Well,
let us know.
I'm very
I'm actually going
excited
to the
that
musical too. I actually would be interested in going.
I love
yeah,
music.
I appreciate that. We're pretty excited about it. My partner and I, my production manager Kaya, the one who does the videoing for me, she's an amazing human being. She can like play every instrument. She
Wow.
dances. She passed for the Rockettes in New York, but the
Mm.
person at her height never retired because you once you pass, you have to wait for someone at your height to retire, and no one ever did, so she never got to dance with the Rockettes, but she actually is good enough to have been in that group. So she's an amazing person, and she's working and directing my show so that I can sort of put it up on a stage soon. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be local, and then maybe someone will see it. We'll see.
For sure.
So she does videography and production.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. I might want to.
Yeah, she does animation too. She some of my
Wow.
videos, I teach humor classes on how to be funny, and she animates them so that you can like watch cartoons of the things that I'm saying, so that you don't have to just stare at me the whole time trying to be funny. So
Oh,
she
that's
does
wavy.
everything. She's an incredible human being. I'm
Wow.
lucky to have her.
You're really a jack of all trades.
No,
Interesting
seriously.
humor. Wow.
Well, remember, it's all sentences though. Remember, I can't fix a sink. There's a lot of things I can't do. So it's sentences. If it comes down to communication, like me talking to other people, me, putting sentences together, that's the thing I can do.
Gotcha. So talk about your book, Storyworthy, and why do you think storytelling is so pivotal?
Well, I started telling stories in 2011 in New York for The Moth, which is a international storytelling organization. They produce live shows on stage without notes, competitive story slams, which I love because I'm really competitive. So you stand on a stage, you tell a story, 9 other people tell a story, and at the end, the judges tell you who was the best. And I went on a whim. My buddies were like, "You've had the worst life of anyone we know. Go tell a story. It'll be great."
Wow.
And I didn't want to do it at first. I was like, why do I want to go to New York and tell stories to hipsters with side eye and man buns? Like, they're just going to be not nice people. And it turns out that's not true at all. So I went to New York to the New Eurekans Poets Cafe, and I told a story, and I won. And I
Mm.
fell in love with it, like just instantly. And I've been telling stories all over the world now, ever since then for the past 11 years. The thing about storytelling is it's a couple things. One is you really start to understand yourself. Suddenly everything makes sense in your life. It was a storytellers are curious about themselves in a really positive way. We're sort of self-centered in a positive way, meaning we actually take time to think about ourselves. So, like, there's a day when I'm playing golf with my friend Steve. It's 100 degrees, and I've left my Gatorade in the car by mistake. So we're climbing up a hill on like the seventh hole, and Steve sees that I'm sweating, and he's got an extra Gatorade. So he says, "You want my Gatorade, man? I got two." And I said no, which is crazy because I was dying. So we get back to the cars, and Steve leaves, but I sit in my car because I'm a storyteller, and I'm always curious about myself. So I say to myself, why did I say no to the Gatorade? That was stupid. Like, I was dying. And as soon as I asked myself the question and I thought about it for a minute, I understood. When I was a kid, I was hungry all the time. We never had enough to eat. And when you're hungry as a kid, it becomes a source of shame for you. And what you do is you never ask for food or accept food from other people, because if you're a kid and someone says, "Hey, you want my extra brownie?" that means that someday you might have to give them an extra brownie, and you'll never have one. So it's better to be hungry than to let people know you are hungry. And as like a 40-year-old man climbing a hill, I'm still saying no to food, even though I can give him a Gatorade tomorrow. I've got the means that I can feed myself and other people now, and yet I've still got a 10-year-old boy in me who's who's rejecting food just out of habit because I'm still the kid I used to be. Storytellers figure out their lives in that way, and suddenly things make sense. Whereas most people say no to the Gatorade, keep moving on, and never think about it, and they don't attach back to their childhood. So that's one reason. And the other one is you just make really meaningful connections to people. I tell a story on a stage, I step off that stage, and someone comes up all the time and they tell me the deepest, darkest secrets from their lives. Sometimes I don't even want to hear them. Just before the pandemic, I was at Housing Works in New York City on Crosby Street. I told a story about bad parenting, a stupid thing I did with my daughter to hurt, and it hurt her feelings. And when I stepped off the stage, this woman comes up to me, she grabs me. People touch me all the time because they feel like they know me just by hearing my stories. She pulls me in and she says, every time I go into someone's house, even my own mother's house, I have to steal something. And then she pulls me in even closer and she whisper yells at me. She goes, I've never told anyone that before. So this is like a 40-year-old lady who has a mental illness and she's never told anyone. She sees me on a stage talking about parenting and sort of admitting to something that most people don't want to talk about. And she says, that's the guy I'm going to tell my secret to. And that happens to me all the time. So when you become a storyteller, people feel connected to you. They feel really close to you. And once they get close to you, you can sort of weave your way into their hearts and minds and move them. It's how I'm a good teacher. It's not because I'm a good designer of lessons. It's because I tell my students stories. And I never tell them the stories about Matt the hero. It's always stories about like Matt the failure, Matt the embarrassment, Matt the shame. And as soon as I tell them those stories, suddenly they feel connected to me. And so they'll run through walls for me. That's how I'm a good teacher. So telling stories gets people close to you and gets them to trust you and believe in you. It's really a powerful tool.
What are some of the best ways to improve your storytelling?
Well, the first thing you can do is you have to have stories to tell. The person with the most stories tends to be the best storyteller. So, part of my book Storyworthy gives people lots of strategies on how to find stories in your everyday life and then hold on to them. Because if I ask you to like take however you are old and we subtract, let's say 8, so I'm 50, subtract 8 is 42. When I play this game with people and I say, so tell me something about what you were like 8 years ago, something that happened in your life 8 years ago, people often have a real hard time coming up with anything. Like they went all the way around the sun and they can't even remember a damn thing from that year. It's not because their year was boring and they didn't do anything. It's because they didn't hold on to anything. It's because things happen to us and then we just throw them away like they're trash. So the first thing you can do to become a better storyteller is to start holding on to your memories, start holding on to the things that are important. So, I do a thing called homework for life, and thousands of people all over the world now do it with me. All you have to do is Google the phrase homework for life. You'll see my TED talk and you can learn all about it. But it's a simple strategy that takes 5 minutes a day, will change your life and give you more stories than you have time to tell. And most people will not do it. Instead, they will walk away from their memories like they're meaningless. And then they say stupid things like time flies. I am here to tell you, time does not fly. I did enough hours in detention in high school to tell you, time does not fly. I sat in a jail cell. I can tell you, time does not fly. The only reason people think time flies is because they don't hold on to any of their memories. So time feels like it's worth nothing because they're not actually retaining the, the important moments from their lives in a way that deserve to be retained. So Google homework for life and watch that TED talk. It's the most important thing you can do in your life, both as a storyteller and as someone who wants to just remember their life in a meaningful way.
How does one hold on to the memories? Do they write it down?
Yeah, I use I use an Excel spreadsheet. I don't want people to write down stories because I think that's crazy. No one will do it. If I said you got to write for 20 minutes a day, I know even I would have a hard time every day. I got to write down the thing that happened to me yesterday. I got other things to write or other things to do. But I just use a spreadsheet. I got the date on one side and I stretch that second column over. So basically in the length of a computer screen. That's all you've got to write your memory down. So if when that student told me I don't want to be a soldier anymore, I love my life, I don't want to die in a ditch, that's in my homework for life because I never want to forget that thing that the kid said to me. When my son was playing basketball with the umbrella, that's in my homework for life because I know when he's 25, I'm not going to remember that he played basketball with an umbrella over his head when he was 10, unless I write it down, unless I note it and take care of it and make sure that it's always there for me. Every single day, I find somewhere between, let's say, 3 and 10 things in my day that I don't want to forget, that I never want to forget. And so those go into my homework for life. It takes 5 minutes. I just write it across a computer screen. put a date on it, and it's done. And now I never lose a day. It's so easy to lose a day. If I just ask you, what'd you do 3 Wednesdays ago? A lot of times people have no idea what they did 3 Wednesdays ago. They'll say, well, I went to work, but I don't really remember anything that happened at work that day. I can tell you, I've got 3 Wednesdays ago. I probably have, half a dozen things from 3 Wednesdays ago that I can hold on to. And as soon as I read them, I'm right back there. I can remember them perfectly. So we
Yeah,
got to hold on to these memories. It's just so important.
that's interesting. I might take you up on that offer. I might have to start doing that.
No, don't say might. Might is a stupid word. Don't say I might do it. Say I'll do it. I hate the word might. I tell my students this all the time. They go, "Yeah, Mr. Dix, maybe I'll do that." Not maybe, do it. At least do it. And then if you hate it after a week, you can be like, that guy's crazy. But give it a chance. Okay.
Honestly, as a avid might user, more times than not when I say might, I typically don't end up doing it.
Okay.
I'll be
Exactly.
honest.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm opposed to that word. When you hear the word might coming out of your mouth, you should cringe. You should be like, whoa, what am I thinking? Why would I might do it? Right?
And it's funny because when people tell me, "Oh, I might do it," or "I'll get to when I get to it," or maybe we'll see, I automatically register that's no.
Right.
I automatically assume that
Me
that's
too.
no, you're not gonna do it. So
Right.
it's funny that I use that in my vernacular. Well, maybe I register that as no, so maybe I'm basically saying no, but I'll do it. I'll do it.
Right. Good. If you do it for 100 days, I have a deal with everybody. If you do it for 100 days in a row,
Yeah,
email
yeah.
you email me after 100 days. You say, I did it for 100 days. I send you something back. You get something from me. I'll email you something. It's just something to make you smile. But it's my way to make sure people are doing it. Here's what I can tell you. Every single day, without exception, I get at least one email or Facebook message or tweet, something that says, I started doing homework for life 100 days ago and it's changed my life. No one has ever emailed me and said, I did it for 100 days. It was a waste of time. No one has ever said that to me, ever. So you just have to commit to it. You have to do it, and you have to do it long enough to get good at it. But it's 5 minutes a day. I always say, if you're going to brush your teeth every day, and I hope you do homework for life as well. It's just another 5 minutes. I promise. Just watch one less YouTube video or stare at Instagram for 5 less minutes a day, or wake up 5 minutes early, whatever it is. Like, you've got 5 minutes in a day to do homework for life. You're burning it somewhere else in a way that's not going to matter in a year anyway. So just use it for something that's going to be important.
I thank God for this interview because this gentleman right here, I think, has the one of the most untold interesting lives out there. So I think he's the ideal person for Homework for Life, man.
You're very kind. But I will tell people, never think that sort of you have to have a super interesting life to be able to be doing homework for life, because watching my son play basketball with an umbrella is not a really amazing thing, and yet it gets into my homework for life. Or a kid says something to me, or someone else says something to you, some person says something kind or terrible or interesting, or a lot of times in my homework for life, it's stuff I learned that I did not know. I read something in a book and I go, oh my God, I never knew that. How did I get to the age of 50 and no one ever told me that? So that goes into my homework for life. The moment I remembered it, the moment Kobe Bryant died, that's in my homework for life. I was in a parking lot at Bertucci's. I was about to get out of the car. I picked up my phone to look at it and I saw a Twitter alert about Kobe Bryant. I clicked on it and I saw he died. And my wife and kids were in Bertucci's and I was still sitting in the car. And my wife hadn't noticed that I wasn't behind her. And so she got in the restaurant and she said, where's Matt? She went back to the car. She found me and I said, I just need a minute. Like, I just found out some bad news. Now, she had no attachment to Kobe Bryant. She was aware he was a basketball player, but she didn't have an attachment like I did. And I'm a Celtics fan and I'm connected to Kobe Bryant. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So that's in my homework for life. And I promise you, like, that kind of stuff eventually fades away if you don't hold on to it, if you don't find a way to keep it in your life. So you remember the bad stuff, you remember the good stuff, or you just let it all go away and you lose a whole year of your life. You're like, damn, I don't even remember what I was doing my 29th year of life. Like, that should not happen.
That's a very good point. The year's almost over, and I probably couldn't tell you like very significant moments from this year.
Right. And you had them. It's not that you're boring. It's not that things aren't happening to you. you just didn't hold on to them. You threw them away like they were worthless. And I'm telling you, they're priceless.
Oh man, that's good stuff right there. So, if someone wants to become an author today, what do you suggest that they do?
They should write. I mean, it's terrible advice because it's so obvious, but you got to write every day. I tell my students, my 10-year-old students and the adults who I work with, writing is about connecting sentences together to make meaning. And the more sentences that you connect together to make meaning, the better the writer you're going to be. It's just like push-ups, I do 50 push-ups 4 times a day. I can do 50 push-ups at a time. My students can't even believe it because I'm not, like, you look at me, I'm not in the best shape in the world. But I started at 20 push-ups and now I can do 50 because I connected push-ups to push-ups. It's the same thing, sentences to sentences, which means you don't have to write a book every day. Every day I'm not working on a book. One of the things I love to do is write letters. I write physical letters that I put in envelopes and mail to people. I write 200 letters a year. So if you're not in the mood to write a book that day or write poetry or write your short story, write a letter to someone. One of the bank tellers at my local bank just really helped me out in a really significant way. She really went out of her way to help me. So today I wrote a letter to her manager saying, "Hey, Emily at the bank, she was fantastic. She really helped me out in a way that she didn't need to. And I want to let you know what a great person she is." I wrote that letter. I dropped it in the mail to the bank. I connected sentences to other sentences to other sentences. And I like to think because I do that every single day, I'm becoming a better writer. So it doesn't matter what you're writing, just write sentences that connect to other sentences, and you will eventually become a better writer as a result. And then maybe one day you'll write your book, and that would be great too.
When you write about your day, do you does it ever come a point in time like, wow, like I have enough like journal entries to make a whole book? Or like do you have the intentions of writing about your day for it to become a book?
Um, Not necessarily like that. What happens is I steal the moments from my life that pop up in the book, we'll say. So, I can't write a book about my son playing basketball with an umbrella, right? But there may come a day when you're reading one of my novels and there's a kid on a basketball court shooting hoops with an umbrella in his hand. And you'll go, "Oh, that's an interesting image, right? What a great imagination that guy has." And it's not an imagination. It's I look around the world, I see stuff, and then I steal it and put it into my books. If you're one of my close friends, when you read one of my books, they call me all the time. They go, "I'm reading your book. I see that you wrote about John here. I see that you wrote about that night we were over at the Patriots game here." Like, yeah, true. I change names, I change circumstances. Not everything is always going to be the same, but I steal from my life all the time. So it's not like I'm finding things in my life that become books all the time, but I'm finding a lot of stuff that makes its way into books. And I think that's just as good.
When you're writing a book, what is the process and how long does that normally take you?
Well, for length, it's varying. My first book took 3 years to write, and then someone paid me for it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to take 3 years the next time, right? So the next book I wrote in a year because now I know people pay me for it. So, I've written a book in 9 months and I've taken 3 years to write a book. It's probably about a year and a half for every book that I've written about. It depends on how much time I have and how easy the book is coming out for me, but probably about a year and a half. The process is I write and I write whenever I can. So instead of saying I write from 10 to 2, that kind of nonsense, I write in all the cracks of my life. So if I have a podcast interview like this and I sit down at the computer and I look at the clock and I see I have 6 minutes before it's time to click on the link, I'll write for 6 minutes. I'll either write new sentences or I'll look at the thing I was writing earlier that day and say, well, I'll reread the 3 paragraphs I wrote and see if they're good, see if I can revise them in some way, make them better before I move on. The problem is people lose minutes like they're meaningless. People throw away 10 minutes like they're nothing. These awful computers we have in our pockets, right, which serve me very well. I know that if I find myself with 10 minutes, my instant and automatic reaction is take your phone out and look at something. And that never gets us anywhere. Like it only makes us feel bad, probably, about how we are and who we are. So what I do instead of taking this thing out is I go, oh, I got 10 minutes, which I have all the time. Like tell my son it's time to go. His shoes are always in 2 different rooms and he doesn't know where the hell they are. So that means it's going to take him at least 5 minutes to find the shoes and put him on his feet before we can get out the door. But I have a book sitting by the door, a book of quotes that I love that I'm trying to memorize. So maybe I'm standing by the door and I got my book of quotes and I'm memorizing some quotes, or I got my laptop open on the table and I'll go and I'll sit and I'll do some writing. Or the dishwasher needs to be emptied and I can't empty the whole thing, but I'll empty just the top tray. That way, when I get home later, I don't have to empty the top tray. I'll just empty the bottom tray. But people do these weird things like, well, if I can't do the whole dishwasher, I'm not going to empty like 4 things from it. Why? If you empty 4 things now, you don't have to empty 4 things later, right? I'm going to fold half the load of laundry so I don't have to fold the other half later, or I'll do something really good for myself, things that I know improve our mood. So like petting a cat or a dog, weirdly, really improves your mood. It causes your brain to release chemicals that make you happy, and sitting under a tree and looking up into the branches, that's actually proven to improve your brain chemistry. So I'm aware of all the things that I can do with 5 or 10 minutes of my time, including writing, which I do all the time. And most people, they think, well, if I don't have an hour, I'm not going to sit down and write. And that's why they don't write. And that's why they die instead of writing books, because they're waiting for enough hours to collect so that they can sit down and write a book. Well, meanwhile, I'm just writing in the 2 minutes I got here and the 10 minutes I got here. And admittedly, I get up early in the morning. So, I got a good hour or 2 in the morning that I can do some work too. But I just make it my priority. I make a choice to not binge watch television. And I love TV. My wife and I love television, and we barely watch it because we know she'd rather be playing the ukulele, knitting, working on the class that she's taking right now, writing a paper for it, cooking. She knows that those things are more important than sitting down and watching the TV show that we love, because we know TV show doesn't yield anything. It doesn't bring us any real joy in the future. But learning to play her ukulele and cooking good food and knitting a sweater for someone and taking her college class so she can become a better teacher, all of those things, those are the things that really yield fruit.
That's very inspirational for the procrastinators like myself out there.
Yeah. Well, it's not to say I don't watch TV either, right? I watch every Celtics game, but I don't watch every Celtics game without a laptop on my lap and I'm doing the nonsense work that I have to do, like recording my receipts for the day and emailing people about stupid things. Like I make sure that when I'm ready to watch my Celtics, I got some stuff to do. I'm folding laundry. Like I'm doing stuff that I can do while watching a game so that I'm not just sitting there for 2.5 hours, but with my feet up eating Doritos. I am eating Doritos. I am drinking Diet Coke, right? But I'm folding some laundry. I'm responding to some email. I'm wrestling with my son during the game. We're playing games like, every time the Celtics get a 3-pointer, you get to punch me in the arm. Every time they clang a 3-pointer, I get to jump on top of you. Like we do nonsense like that. But we're going to remember that. That is important stuff that means something. So we do stuff like that all the time.
Definitely. That's dope, man. My final question, if you could choose 5 books to read for the rest of your life, only 5, what would they be?
Oh, that's a terrible question. How could I choose just 5? All right. 5 books that I can read for the rest of my life. Well, I'll choose Treasure Island. Treasure Island was my favorite book as a kid, and I still love it today. It's a great adventure story. I love a book that's got a bad guy who becomes a good guy. Long John Silver in that book, he's a murderer, he's a pirate, he's an evil guy, and in the end, you're somehow rooting for him. I love that. So I take Treasure Island because I love it so much. I'll take Stephen King's On Writing because I'll listen to his voice, in my head all day long, and listening to him remind me about the important things of writing. That'll help me a lot. So I'll take that one too. I love Shakespeare. I teach my 10-year-old Shakespeare. I think I'll take Hamlet. I like Hamlet because it makes me mad. Can't stand all the stupid decisions that Hamlet makes me mad every time I read it. And I don't know. I think it's good to get mad sometimes when you're reading stuff. I think it's like, I think that's a good thing to get really mad. I will take Toni Morrison's Beloved because every time I read that book, I see something that I didn't see the time before. And that's a good, if I'm only getting 5 books, I want a book that kind of keeps showing me things that I missed the last time. And that's what that book does. And I guess I'll take my favorite collection of Billy Collins poetry. I don't know which one it is because I love it all equally. So maybe I'll just close my eyes and pick one of his books of poetry off the shelf, and then I'll be my fifth one. So that's the 5 today. Now, if you ask me 5 more in an hour from now, I'll have 5 different ones probably. But right now, those will be my 5.
Got you. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us. God bless you, man. Definitely gotta listen to this one back. And I'm gonna do the homework for life.
100 days, I want to hear from you. You'll get something back from me.
Oh
Yeah, I'll
man,
do it too.
100
Yeah.
days. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll do it.
yeah, we got it, man. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Go watch the TED Talk, okay? Go watch it. 16
right.
minutes. It'll teach you everything you need to know. Change your life. I'd love to hear from you in 100 days. Truly.
Okay.
Yeah. But